America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Justice for all.
Thank you. We've just returned from our executive session. And can I get a motion to approve the agenda as stated, please? Second, I get a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Does anybody have any items to pull from the consent agenda this evening? All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated? Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Oh, any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention from me. That brings us to the items moved from the consent agenda for which there were none. So that'll bring us to our superintendent's report.
Okay, good evening. A few updates for our board and our school community. Our strategic plan update. Over the last couple of weeks, we've encouraged our school community members, parents, residents, staff to participate in our strategic plan, which will help craft the direction of the district over the next 3 to 5 years. We had 70 folks, 15 staff, and 55 community members identify interest. They have all been assigned to various teams and roles and responsibilities. We began today with a small group of representatives of staff, parents, and community members to begin the work. We had a 2-hour kickoff meeting. It was virtual. That group will reconvene in 1 month in mid-November for an in-person meeting to continue the work and to identify some of the priorities. There will be opportunities for folks to get involved in terms of what we agreed to today were some focus group interviews, some in-person interviews, opportunity to shadow a student at the elementary, middle school, and high school level, and other opportunities to receive more input in terms of what our strategic plan will look like going forward. So it was a process that unfortunately we had to put on hold back in 2017 when Indian Point announced their closure. That would have been the time in our original timeline to reconvene this work, but we were focused on other matters at that time. But it's important that we try to turn the page and turn the corner and move on with planning the next handful of years in our district. So as those groups continue to meet, we receive input and identify draft strategies and what the plan will look like. We'll continue to keep the board updated. I know that's a priority for the board, one of the board goals that were that was approved 2 weeks ago. So as this work unfolds, I know that we only had 70 people initially identify interest, but there will be plenty of opportunities for others to get involved. So we set the groundwork today. We'll have some more discussions between now and next month, but we'll have a little more to report on probably at the end of November or early December in terms of timeline, other opportunities to get involved, and how we'll be collecting data and meeting with folks. So very exciting and been a long time coming, but that important work has been launched. Any questions on that? Okay. Brief Princeton plan update. I just want to highlight a few items that we will report on in more detail on Friday in our communication to parents and community members. We have gone through the process of identifying staffing and tentatively place them in schools in which they will be next year. That process is still ongoing, but for the most part, we've identified class sizes and class sections, as well as meeting with the HHCSD to make sure we follow the contract provisions for moving teachers or transferring them based on this new alignment. Also, in terms of planning to move, we have ordered boxes and identified packing slips. And in the next few weeks, we'll be able to provide those to teachers so they can begin packing at their own pace of what they feel comfortable with. The custodians and with the help of Anthony Merlini have identified storage areas within the schools as well as key times during the current school year when materials and supplies will be moved. That will typically take place during vacations or long weekends. But that schedule is being drafted with Anthony as well as the head custodian. So we will shortly begin the process of providing resources to teachers to pack up as they feel comfortable doing so. The principals have visited their prospective schools. They've done that with their secretaries and I believe their nurse. So the principal and main office staff and nurse will be going to their new school next year. They have looked at blueprints, they've reviewed safety plans, they've toured all of the 3 schools, identified some areas of perhaps of where grade levels will go or special classrooms. I know that Lisa has been working with the 3 principals very exclusively on ABC program and related services to make sure that each school has the full continuum of services for all of the children when we make that move. They also are going to be meeting on release days, early release days throughout the school year, starting with, I believe, Monday the 25th. The staff will go to or meet with their prospective colleagues in their school assignments next year. They'll be meeting with their prospective principal. They'll be talking in small groups and in large groups. They'll be identifying common language, doing some icebreakers, reviewing curriculum, and really getting to know each other and set the tone for what the meetings will entail and what they need to accomplish throughout the rest of the year. At the same time, as we're planning for this important move, it's important that all 3 schools celebrate their past. So the principals are working closely with all 3 PTAs to have some closing activities throughout the school year. I know ice cream socials and movie nights and t-shirts and festivals are being planned. And we're working very, very closely with the PTA on those initiatives. In fact, I met with the elementary PTA officers, met with the PTA officers last Friday, but today met with the elementary PTA officers. They are taking the lead on networking with their parents. They're going to put a survey together for parents, asking specific questions and generating items of interest that parents have, prepping for the move. Questions could be around transportation or special education, transitions, what the role of the school counselor will be, or social worker, continuity of curriculum. All of those types of topics are going to be generated with the help and the leadership of the elementary PTA officers. They also are working with the New York State PTA to identify other schools to speak with. So for example, if there are questions around transitions and social emotional support as students transition from one school to the next, we're working very closely with the New York State Regional PTA liaison, who will match us up with other schools, not only in the region, but throughout the state, so that our parents can connect with other parents. We found last year when we were able to connect parents to parents, those conversations were much more fruitful and certainly more direct in terms of the parental experience and parents commenting and providing information on the experience of their children. So in terms of those efforts, those are up and running. And just a few others in terms of transportation, we continue to refine our prospective bus routes. Liz and her team are going through with a little more detail and even perhaps hand scheduling bus routes for students that are projected to be on the bus anywhere between 35 and 40 minutes. The goal is to get all bus routes under 40 minutes. Our computer system or our routing software can do the majority of that work, but Liz and her team will finish it literally by hand because some of the routing software doesn't understand the intricacies of some of our neighborhoods or cul-de-sacs or the inability for buses to turn around. But the goal is to get every bus ride under 40 minutes, and that work has also begun. So we'll continue, as I mentioned at the beginning, we will have an update for the community on Friday. We have a dedicated web space on our homepage for all updates regarding Princeton plan. So we will take my update and put a little more meat on the bones and be able to provide that for our parents and community members on Friday, and we'll continue to provide updates in these forums as well as PTA meetings as we move forward. So it's a sneak preview of what everyone else will hear a little bit in a little more detail on Friday.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. That was only a brief update. It was pretty comprehensive. Does anybody have any questions for Joe about what you just said?
Any potential start times for the elementary schools, since now they stagger start, how?
Yeah, those are going to remain unchanged for busing patterns. That was a decision that was made really early on in the adoption plan last spring. So Furnace Woods, although it will be 4th and 5th grade, will still start a little earlier and release a little earlier. All 4th and 5th grade students will have their own bus run, regardless of where in the district they live. So that will be important, and that will alleviate bus runs and bus times, as well as number of students on the bus. The BV, who will house 2nd and 3rd, and Frank G, who is K1, they'll start at their current times. So those staggered start times are important based on the fleet that we have, so that we can get more runs out of the 14 or 15 buses that we have.
Are they sharing a bus run, or they have a separate bus run with each school?
BV and Frank G will share a bus run, and that was a key discovery, because we will be able to drop off. We'll be able to pick up all 1st through 3rd graders at the same time. That was a concern parents had, is they didn't want to have to be at the bus stop 3 different times for their child to go to 3 different schools. So if you're going to Frank G or BV, there will be one bus that will pick up your children if you have them in two spots. So it will be the same pickup place and time and the same drop off place and time.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I just want to say I'm really glad the PTA is getting involved and getting feedback from the parents so that we know what their concerns are and that we can get them.
Yeah, they agreed at the end of our about hour-long meeting today. They're going to work on a survey. They'll pre-slug some topics that remained of interest last spring and still are of interest, but also an opportunity to identify more topics. And then they'll work with the state association to try to line us up with some resources. And the last update I have are all things COVID. 2 weeks ago, we received the approval to move forward with Westchester County for surveillance testing. The governor has mandated that all staff in schools in New York State that do not show proof of vaccination, that they must be tested weekly. We began last week asking staff to provide proof of vaccination. We're leaving that portal open until Monday. All staff that have shown proof of vaccination will not be subject to testing, or will not be subject to mandatory testing. There is a question, we met with HHCSD on yesterday. There was a question whether or not staff who are vaccinated can opt into the testing program. That is still an open question with the testing company, because they want to make sure that that they have enough tests, especially for the mandated subjects, which are non-vaccinated adults or staff, as well as students. So we're still working on whether or not testing can be available for everyone, but by law it has to be available for non-vaccinated staff. So we hope to be able to kick that off shortly. For students, we need to do pool testing. And so we are working with the county on the language for parent consent. Parents have to provide consent for every single test. That consent will go directly to the county and the testing company. The county and the testing company will prepare the test in advance. The test will be delivered to each school. The test will then be provided to students to go home and take under the supervision of their families, and then return to school. Many schools who have been doing testing even last year when they were in the red zone, if you remember that criteria, schools that were in the red zone had to test all the time. Many schools tried to do this testing during the school day, and they have abandoned that model for a number of reasons. One, it was disruptive to the educational process. Two, it took nurses and staff away from their core job, which was handling emergencies or situations at school as they arose. And the tests have really evolved pretty dramatically just in the last year plus. So the test can be safely transported to and from school under the supervision of parents. They can do the swab, put it in the vial, bring it back. Part of the arrangement is that we overnight ship the test to the lab. And then within 24, 36 hours, we get the results, and those are communicated directly to the family. So there's a lot of logistics that need to be worked out because we'll be testing anywhere between 500 and 700 kids a week. But it's important that we keep that process separate from our education process of when students are in the school. So there is an expectation that students are doing those tests at home under the supervision of parents.
Has this been done? Has this been done anywhere in the state as of yet with the parents doing it? Because I seem very concerned that parents are going to be caught off guard and maybe not be aware of what they should be doing. How are we going to educate the
Yes.
parents? And has this successfully been done elsewhere yet?
Yeah, many districts who are in the testing regimen like us are considering doing the same. Not many have started because of the delays in getting the agreement done and making sure the companies can secure the tests. But the testing company and the Department of Health have short little YouTube videos that we will send out to parents, links for them, one-pagers for them to understand how to do it. So there'll be a lot of education that will be going out to families on how to administer the test.
I'm sure in multiple languages.
Yes, correct.
Can you release, once the submission of proof of vaccination is done, can you release the percentage of faculty and staff that are fully vaccinated in the district? Or is it something that has to remain confidential?
I'll have to check.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll see if that becomes basically public record. Because vaccinations are not mandated, I don't know that becomes a public record, but I can check.
Joe, are the COVID tests that the students will be taking, are they the swab type or are they the spit tests?
I'm sorry?
The swab type of testing or are they the spit tests?
No, they're the spit tests.
I have two questions. Is there a required number of students that we have to test each week?
At the beginning of this, there was. It was a percentage of your total population. So we have to attempt to, I think it's 15 or 20%.
But it's voluntary. So what
Exactly.
what happens if we can't get 15% of parents to agree to it?
They accept as many as we can,
Okay.
or they'll take they'll accept as many test results as they receive.
Okay, there's not gonna be like a fine or a penalty.
Correct.
Okay. And my other question was about funding. Is this coming through the county funding or who's paying for all this?
The district is not paying a dime. So some of this is federal money flowed through the state, flowing through the county. I believe the county is using some state and federal coronavirus relief funds to do this. Our county, I think, is one of the few in the state that has a centralized approach. In other counties, they basically said, okay, schools, here are your tests, you figure it out, and here are the labs you could work with. We really advocated for consistency in of the 40-ish school districts in our county. So what Westchester did was they identified 3 different testing companies to provide and analyze the tests. So that's who the agreement is with. Our agreement's with the county. The county has divided all the school districts into 3 even groups with 3 different testing companies. But that financial agreement is between the county and the testing company. The district has not contributed to any of that. What we do need to contribute to, and that's what we're discovering, is sort of the back end, right? But some of the more administrative tasks of identifying the students, getting student information to make sure that the company has it so they can pre-slug that onto the test or onto the bag. So there will be some work we need to do, but there's no money being exchanged between us and any other agency to complete this.
Thank you.
One last question. When do we expect for the communications to begin going out regarding the testing for the students?
We are shooting for next week for the consent. What we want to do is at least get the parent consent up front to identify how many potential tests we would need, and then we need to work with the county and the company to make sure they have enough to test at either that 15 or 20% threshold. The other open question is whether or not a fully vaccinated student is subject to the tests. And the third question is if I wasn't randomly selected for a test, can I still take one if you have one available? So we're still working this out. When the governor announced this, this is important. When the governor announced this back in the end of August, there was a lot of relief from a lot of people associated with public education. But the fine print had more holes in it than the announcement. And while the announcement was made before the school year saying there will be testing in school, there also was no target date or expectation of when it began. And so, we had spent a lot of time as a board with the county reviewing the agreement, just the agreement alone to enter into the testing, to make sure we weren't sharing confidential information, whether it was staff information or student information, in a series of educational law considerations that were not initially considered between the county and the testing. So many districts in our area have not begun this regimen. They may be testing, but that's because they had an agreement from the previous school year, not because of the governor's mandate to begin it now.
All right.
We can go around the horn briefly. Lisa, if you want to give an update from PPS.
Wow, Joe kind of stole some of my thunder. We've been meeting with staff, different levels, to talk about Princeton plan and what it looks like, and really having conversations, looking at our class list as we go forward, how many sections will we need, because as we know, we're growing. Last year, I think we had 50 new special ed kids from previous year. We had at least 38 move into the district last year. So our numbers are much higher. Our students coming into our ABC program is tremendous. Our TSP program is tremendous. We have, I think we're up to 24 new tuition kids. So that continues to grow, and that's a positive because it talks about our programs and all the supports we're able to give kids throughout the county, which is something that we do for each other amongst school districts, which is very positive. We continue just to grow and look and keep reevaluating programs and our needs K to 12.
Hi, really the same. Joe really spoke quite a bit about the early release day, which is focusing for K-5 on Princeton plan. So they'll use their faculty meetings this year to plan closing activities in the buildings they exist in now. And on the early release days, when they go to their newly assigned schools, they'll plan for the coming year and those experiences. Basically, we used to talk to the principals about changing kindergarten registration and orientation and screening, because obviously that's always been done at 3 schools, and now we need to focus on bringing people to Frank G or potentially off-site. We did do some screening last year at the field library, so we'll talk about that. Making sure that, again, even in the month of October, teachers have what they need to do their jobs, waiting for some materials. Just as we can't find paper towels, we also can't find some workbooks that we need. There are supply delays even in the world of education, so we're waiting patiently on some of those materials to arrive. Thankfully, people have digital resources that in the interim we can use, but nonetheless, the delays impact our jobs as well. Other than that, I think it's just, no, we do not. I'll say this publicly just in case anybody is still questioning it, because I myself cannot believe this. We still do not have test scores from last spring. So we are waiting, they are embargoed, and waiting for the commissioner to make her press release about this. So that is still on hold. But they are of course moving ahead with testing this spring in all of the content areas as we would in any other school year. But I've had quite a few parent phone calls about that. So it's not that we haven't released them, it's that we cannot release anything yet. So once we get the go ahead, that information will be shared with everyone. The results for the nicest slats have been shared. So that has gone home to families. Our teachers are beginning to work on regrouping kids, celebrating the kids who have exited the program, good for them, and thank you to the teachers. And then figuring out what instruction looks like for children that we have now. We have quite a few new entrants this year, so that has also been interesting, trying to make sure that they are appropriately placed in the schools and then in their services. And that's really about it. I mean, you're, focused on where we're headed. We have some projects this year. I'll keep you updated as we move along with that. But that's curriculum and instruction.
Thank you both. All right, we do. Oh, I'm sorry, Enrique.
No, it's okay. Mine
I
is,
was looking at that side.
mine is the exciting part. Remember, I'm going to talk about accounting. So on Monday, we had our audit committee. We looked at our financials from last year. And I think that we all agree that it was a good year. The books are in order. And hopefully we can discuss a little bit more in our next board meeting when the board will have to approve the books and the comments. Thank you.
I know in the past, we used to have a presentation at the board meeting. I don't turn it on. Am I on now? I'm on now. In the past, we used to have a presentation by the audit firm at the board meeting. Are we going to be having that? I don't recall that in recent years.
It's with the audit committee, but I'll have a small presentation in 2 weeks when the board has to approve the.
Just by you or?
If the board wants, I can bring the audit committee. If that's what you want, sure. I think it would be good. No, I think that it would be good. We have a new partner, so the board should meet the new partner, but it's up to you.
I think it would be good for the entire board to hear, this is my personal opinion,
No,
for
sure.
the entire board to hear a little bit about, financials and even the community, probably be a good thing. I know we used to do it years ago and I don't recall it in a long, long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
If
can
that
discuss
works.
that further.
Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to our presentation and discussion section. We do not have any this evening, so that will bring us to our first audience comments, which is on agenda items. Because we feel community engagement is important, the Hendrick-Hudson Board of Education welcomes public comment during this portion of the meeting. Please note that the public comment period is not designed to be a discussion. The board is here to listen. Please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns and questions this evening. This is because the board trustees and the superintendent take your comments seriously and want to have sufficient time to thoughtfully process your comments and to research issues if need be. We will consider your comments as we deliberate at future meetings, or we'll have the proper staff member follow up with you at a later date as appropriate. To maintain an orderly meeting, the board has allotted 15 minutes for each public comments period, which may be extended by board consensus. Guidelines for those wishing to address the board are as follows. Each speaker should have signed in with the district clerk prior to the public comment section and will be called in the order in which they have signed up. We would ask that groups designate one individual to speak on their behalf. It is not permitted to cede your time to another speaker. When called, please step up to the podium and begin by stating your name and affiliation if applicable. Letters, petitions, or other written material should be handed to the district clerk prior to your comments. All comments must be directed to the board. Each speaker is permitted 3 minutes for their comments and must be recognized by the board president. The board vice president, Lisa, will be timing comments and will give a 30-second warning to the speaker by raising a yellow card and indicate when the speaker's time is finished with a red card. The board may limit repetitive comments in order to give time to participants wishing to speak on varied topics, as well as to maintain meeting efficiency. Although we take personal concerns and individual student matters very seriously, the board is not permitted to address these in open session as per state and federal privacy laws. We would ask that you use appropriate administrative channels for these items. The board expects comments to be made without interference from the audience and in a civil manner so that our meeting can serve as a model of appropriate civil discourse for our students. In the unlikely event the meeting becomes unruly, the board may recess the meeting until order can be restored. Please remember, if you prefer not to participate in the public comments portion of the meeting, Written comments to the Board of Education may be submitted in group speaking. You can see the agenda on the district website for contact information. We will now begin our public comment period on agenda items only. Carmen, we have a first speaker.
Our first speaker tonight is Jennifer Martino.
Thank you. Jennifer, will you step up to the microphone, please?
She says her question has been answered. She's just
Oh,
doing
thank
not
you.
have a comment.
Okay. Do we have another speaker?
Our next speaker is Stephanie Hickey.
Ms. Hickey, before you speak, we did look into your comment last week on whether we would be able to allow people to sign up prior to the meeting via email, and unfortunately, our legal counsel suggests that we don't, because it goes against the spirit of the open meeting law, where people are supposed to come and participate in the meeting in the presentations.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. So I was just looking over the board agenda that we have in board docs, and I was looking at the contracts, the administrators' contracts. And one thing that stood out to me was the self-evaluation piece. I was wondering if there's any criteria for that self-evaluation, and I was really hoping that it's just not them doing their own evaluation and Mr. Hochweiler signing off on it, that the Board of Ed was involved in those evaluations. My second question, I tried to FOIL request, but I didn't word it correctly. I was wondering if it was true, if the administrators were paid $15,000 apiece for unpaid sick leave or unpaid vacation time last year, because it was a pandemic last year and there's loads of travel restrictions. So no one really took their vacation time. But maybe since we're in such a good place financially the weekend, that's why they were given the $15,000. My other comment really is that school leaders should model the behavior they want to see in their staff and students. You're not doing that. You've got teachers here without a contract for 3 years. And how long have you guys gone without a contract? I mean, the same anger and frustration I can see, and the people at home can, in the audience with the teachers. Know your community feels the same way. We feel it. You are tearing our community apart. And you know what? I'm not disengaging. It's time for us to take back.
Excuse me, people in the audience, we cannot hear the comments if you're shouting and clapping. Please reserve yourselves.
I love this community and I want us to take back our district. You should know that a large majority feel this way. I mean, whether you agree with me or you don't agree with me, everyone deserves the right to be heard and respected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carmen, do you have any other speakers on the agenda items this
We
evening?
do not have any other speakers for agenda items this.
All right, well, this seems like an appropriate time to acknowledge that there are teachers who are here again this evening advocating for themselves and on their union's behalf. And in doing so, modeling appropriate civic engagement for our students in our community. Welcome. It's also heartwarming to see some community members coming out in support of our wonderful teaching staff. It does show how much our teaching community is appreciated. However, I find it concerning that the board continues to receive input and commentary from parents and community members urging us to approve a contract with the HHCSD on their behalf without fully understanding the specifics and constraints. All contract negotiations are protected by education and public labor law. And without members of the HHCSD or the board revealing confidential information from the negotiating table, members of the community cannot participate with fully informed consent. I will reiterate, the district has never been and is not interested in protracting negotiations longer than is necessary to come to an agreement that is fair to both the taxpayers and the teachers.
What are you talking
We will
about?
continue to come to the table to engage in good faith negotiations with the HHCA as long as we are continuing to have productive conversations or until we come to an impasse. Meanwhile, the board has been and continues to negotiate successfully in good faith with our other district employee associations and individuals to come to mutually agreed upon contract revisions. Once a mutual agreement is reached, these agreements need to be executed in a timely manner. When we arrive at that point with the HHCA, we look forward to doing the same. Thank you. And that will bring us to our committee reports. Does anybody have any committee reports? Lisa.
I have two for today. The first one is that I went as the advocacy liaison for the New York State School Boards Association to a organized meeting that was done by NISBA with Senator Chuck Schumer. And we discussed the importance to us of restoring the state and local tax deduction, also known as SALT, issues for New York State with the digital divide, funding for improvements to schools infrastructures, and full funding of the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, and also in supporting the teacher pipeline. He is a large supporter of public education and has been instrumental in providing significant funding for New York State public schools. The New York State public schools have received $1.1 billion in the CARES Act, $3.5 billion in the CRSSA Act, and $8.2 billion in the ARP Act. The other report that I have is with the, on Monday, October 18th, NISBA had their annual business meeting. At our last Board of Ed meeting, we discussed the resolutions that were being proposed. We voted on them. We elected a new president. I'm happy to report that the Hendrick Hudson resolution was approved resoundingly with like 93% of people there voting in favor of our resolution, which means that NISBA will now be able to be authorized to advocate for changes to the open meetings law so that when Board of Ed members are participating remotely, they do not need to disclose their location or invite the public into their personal space to observe them participating in that meeting. And so thank you to Corey, because he's the one who started this whole process. And thank you for your support with this as well as support. It was really rewarding to see the support that resolution received. And I think it'll make a big difference.
Thank you. Does anybody else have committee reports?
And we already covered the audit committee, so nothing else to say.
All right, yeah. All right, board comments or new business. Anybody have anything before we go to our next audience comment section? Okay, so that brings us to our audience comments for non-agenda items. That statement I read earlier was really long, so I'm not going to read it again. This was a short time ago. So do we have anybody for non-agenda item comments this evening?
Yes, we do. The first person to speak tonight is Dan Galenko.
Mr. Galenko? To speak.
Is this on? All right, so I'm Dan Galenko. I'm the founder of the Safe Indian Point Demolition Facebook group, which is over 150 strong now. And over 50 members of that group endorse what I'm going to say tonight. So big community movement behind this, but the imminent demolition of Indian Point is going to pose fundamental health and safety risks for this community. The risks are particularly acute for BV, which is 4,000 feet from the domes, but the high school and FTL are not immune. The risks to students and staff include contamination by carcinogenic substances through airborne dust. That's radiological, it's asbestos, lead, fire retardants that are going to come down in open air demolition. It's also explosive because the heavy equipment is going to be operating on top of active gas lines. It's also general public safety based on high volume of trucks on public streets. I'm disappointed that the concern over safety does not rise to an agenda item tonight. but I think you're going to find the community is extremely concerned about the health and safety, about health and safety, as evidenced by the 150 plus families that have endorsed and joined this group in just a couple of weeks of time. There's much the school board is going to need to accomplish to maintain public confidence in the safety and integrity of this district's infrastructure. And our demands include, one, the safe, state-of-the-art, real-time contamination testing and monitoring reviewed by an independent scientist, not the NRC and not Holtec. That's going to provide a daily positive assurance of safety for the schools while demolition is going on throughout the demolition. And as a corollary to that, if the school does become contaminated, we expect a safety plan for where the kids are going to learn when the school is not inhabitable. The second piece is restricting demolition over the summer months, restricting the demolition to the summer months when the schools are empty. This is dangerous activity and the kids should not be 4,000 feet away. Deep cleaning of the schools after the summer. There could be contamination from dust and we need to know the school is safe when they go back in the fall. And lastly, it's controversial, but closing the flow of the gas lines when heavy equipment is operating above them. It's insanity to have blast radius around those casts with nuclear fuel when the kids are nearby. And that's a broader community safety environment, not just for the very local. So we look forward to hearing the board's engagement on this. Community confidence in safety is at stake and must be incorporated into the work of the task force on decommissioning. And in particular, obviously the superintendent serves on that body. I am sorry to report my family finds the task force proposal from the school monitoring committee to be deficient and insufficient to provide public confidence in the safety of the school during demolition. You'll be hearing about that from me on the 27th. I will be public commenting at that point, but I know the board values health and safety of the learning environment. And I hope you'll acknowledge that there's a gap in public confidence around the safety, and the silence on this issue is creating even more consternation. So I hope that you will raise a standing public agenda item in this forum to address health and safety of the community integrity of infrastructure. And in the meantime, while that's not happening, feel free to join my Facebook group for information on what's going on. Thank you.
Mr. Galinko, thank you for bringing your concerns to us this evening, and thank you for being an advocate for student safety and for being involved in the process. If you haven't spoken to Mr. Hochreiter already about more ways that you can become involved, please do so. Carmen, do we have another speaker?
Our next speaker is Eric Lindbergh.
Hi, my name is Eric Lindbergh. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have 2 children in the district at BV and North Blue Mountain. I'd just like to add a little bit more perspective on what was just discussed about the safety issues surrounding demolition at Indian Point. I feel that the district has not adequately prioritized this issue as a top level concern. I think that there's a tendency, because this is a multi-decade project that's going to be with the community for up to 60 years or even further, that we have a tendency to kind of put that off and assume that it's something we'll just deal with it when it happens. However, every community that has gone through this process, not just with the nuclear plant, but with chemical plants, with other manufacturing facilities that have closed, but particularly with nuclear facilities, has wished that they had gotten engaged at a legal and a political level much earlier in the process. Because although a school district is only one agency, one organization within that realm, they have a lot of responsibilities in terms of the safety of their children, the safety of the community. There are schools in this country right now that are closed because they have been contaminated by chemical or radioactive detritus from demolition sites. The Pike County, Ohio, there's a middle school that's closed right now because they found enriched uranium from a nearby fuel processing plant that had been decommissioned since 1989 and is still in progress. They've had to close that for at least 2 years because of the contamination. They are not getting adequate cooperation from the government. They are not getting adequate cooperation from the companies doing the work. So it is absolutely imperative that this district, this community as a whole, for the safety of the children of the schools, for the safety of the staff that work in those schools, that they take an active hand now demanding accountability from the various agencies and companies. I will be supremely disappointed if a year from now, I hear that Holtec has agreed to some sweetheart pilot program in exchange for people in the community not being able to voice their concerns or bring legal action against them for certain things. I'll be extremely disappointed if there is some sort of relationship with a company that has a record of malfeasance and lawbreaking, and we haven't advocated for ourselves in that time beforehand. So I would encourage people to make this a top priority and really lay out a plan for adequate testing at these facilities. Just keep in mind, you're moving forward with the Princeton plan. That means that every student in this district is going to spend 2 years 4,000 feet from an active nuclear demolition site. Every single student. And the staff that works there for the next 20 to 60 years, this will be the state of affairs. So we have to lay the groundwork now to address that concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for reiterating those safety concerns. It is very important to getting on the ground level. And we've been very fortunate that Mr. Halfrider has been part of this process from the beginning, really pushing the district's agenda. So continue to do so. Please continue to bring your concerns to us so that we can address those. Another speaker?
Our next speaker is Dana Boyer.
Thank you everyone here today for allowing me to speak. I'll keep it short and brief. My name is Dana Boyer. I'm a parent of 2 elementary children. I also am co-president of the Furnace Woods PTA, but my statements today do not align at all to the Furnace Woods PTA. I wanted to make that clear. So first, one thing I wanted to address was the SMART goals that you all agreed to and issued 2 weeks ago. You certainly hit the S, you hit the A, you hit the R, you hit the T. You did not, unfortunately, hit the M, which is measurable. So what I'm asking for you is reconsider your SMART goals that you have, the 3 of them, and make them measurable. For example, how are we going to measure the implementation of Princeton plan? We need to understand the baseline that you're going to hold our administration to so that we can measure the success or failure. And I all hope, and I think we all agree, to success, so that we can celebrate that in the future or hold responsible parties and then come up with additional plans to fix any ramifications that happen from it. Lastly, I want to leave you with this. Our climate and environment is not a happy one. We as taxpayers voted you in to do a job. We would like you to guide it to a better place. In my company, Manpower Group, we are studying the principles of fierce conversations by Susan Scott. And in her book, she references Ernest Hemingway, The Sun Also Rises. A character is drinking with friends in a bar and is asked, how did you go bankrupt? And he answers, gradually, then suddenly. Susan shares our careers, our schools, our relationships, our lives succeed or fail, gradually, then suddenly, one conversation at a time. We are gradually falling off the ledge. Suddenly, we will be at the bottom. We need you to step in as our BOE members. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dana. Your comments were very popular. Can I have the next speaker? Do we have a speaker?
Our next speaker is Stephanie Hickey. She does have a non-agenda item as well.
I think you've had enough.
You're waiting? Okay. Do we have any other speakers?
We have one more speaker, Elisa Rosen. My name is Elisa Rosen, and I am the president of the Hendrick Hudson Education Association. I am here to speak on behalf of our 250 members, your wonderful teachers, who have begun our third year working under an expired contract, 842 days. It's been mentioned that it is the Board of Education's wish to come to a Swiss revolution for a fair contract. That statement is absolutely confusing to our members, as it is our wish as well, but that opportunity passed 843 days ago. After an unprecedented and difficult 18 months that interrupted a negotiations process that had already gone on for too long, our membership look forward to beginning a new year as normal as possible. We spent the last year and a half invested a good time of our own personal time and our own money to teach ourselves new programs and make improvements in our home internet systems and our home offices that would enable us to teach our students remotely when required. We worked our very hardest, as always, for our students. While the difficulties of teaching through a pandemic continued, and it was upsetting to come to the end of a second year continuing to work under an expired contract, we felt confident that the 10 members of the negotiating team and our NYSET representative would work even harder to settle on a fair agreement. We hoped that would happen by the end of the school year. When mutual dates to meet could not be found in June, we were understanding. It was the end of a stressful and unprecedented year, and June is a busy month. The 10 members of the negotiating team and our NYSET representative would meet with the district representatives over the summer, and we would have a fair contract to ratify in September. We met early in July via Zoom. Some members of the negotiating team met from their vacation locations. Unfortunately, it eventually became apparent that it would be impossible to begin the year with a contract to ratify when our requests for additional meetings and information after that first meeting were continuously delayed. The 10 members of the negotiating team and the additional 240 members of the HHCA returned to school in September, feeling frustrated, sad, angry, distracted, and absolutely unappreciated. The majority of our members have attended the last 3 board meetings to show that we are fed up and disappointed, and we do not see the recognition that we deserve. A fair contract that reflects the unprecedented work we do for our students every day. Our negotiating team is here. We are available to negotiate. Until we have a fair contract, the HHCA will continue our shows of solidarity to make clear that it is not just the 10 members of the negotiating team at the table, but the strength of our entire membership behind them. Know that your educators are pro-kids and pro-contract, and we deserve a fair contract now.
I believe that was the last comment for this evening. All right, can I get a motion to close the meeting, please? Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.